Hodgson put him on his back. Thurston, right foot kick, down the ground, into the in goal almost. Hodgson cuts it off. Hodgson taken by Norton. He took him late. Marshall skips away. Marshall's still going. Marshall's got Richards coming up outside. Now inside. Richards pursued. He pushes Johnson away.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Tuesday. How rusty am I? Tuesday. It's Tuesday, and it's the 30th of January. We're in 2024. Welcome back. Tiger Town podcast. Here we are. Toby's on that end. I'm on this end. Now, this year, a little bit of a change. Got a new sponsor on board. We'd like to say hello to Best On Ground Digital marketing that looks after the little guys. So big thanks to them. You'll find them at bestongrounddigital.com. Best in the business. We've worked a little bit with them outside over the holidays and been having quite a little bit of a chat. And Best On Ground Digital, they won't put you wrong, mate. Toby, mate, how's the hiatus? 6 weeks or so since our last pod. That was a cracker. It had all just blown up in the what would you say? In the region, in the club. Yeah. Everything had exploded. It was going bananas halfway through December. And what do? We sail off into the sunset for a little while.
Well, mate, there was a lot to digest. You had to go off. You had to have some Christmas ham. You had to have a couple of bevies, and you had to digest what had just happened. And I think we did that. I think every Tigers fan did that very, very well. To be honest, I think it was something that every Tigers fan was ecstatic has actually happened. So, look, I don't know about you, but we always have that feeling of optimism heading into 2024. It's might be real this time.
Well, you know what they say, hope springs eternal, right? And we keep falling for the trick every single year.
Look, yeah, we do. But it's nice to have that hope, isn't it? How was your Chrissy anyway, mate?
Oh, yeah, mate, can't complain. Always get a good little break around Christmas time and with a growing family. It's always good to catch up. We try to get down, everybody, listeners know that we're based in Brizzy up here, but we come from coastal New South Wales, both Toby and I, and we try to get down and see our families as best we can. And, mate, it's always good. Plenty of beach time. I love my surf, as you know, and was able to get a handful of waves. Never as many as you hope for. Surf was a bit average, but other than that, all good. What about you?
Yeah, not bad. So I didn't go down to coastal New South Wales. I went down to country Victoria. That's where my wife's from. So I went down and spent some time down there. And look, it was actually quite nice to get away from Brisbane because the heat was ridiculous over Christmas. And in New Year's, I was wearing a hoodie. I know I love the cold, so, I couldn't complain. It was a good New Year's.
Very, very jealous about that. And you said it was hot in Brisbane. I'm going to move that to present.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if it's not hot, it's flooding. We're not far from what's going on at the moment in the north side of Brisbane with the flooding that's been happening in southeast Queensland too. But fortunately, I think both of us have avoided it. You obviously being on the south side yourself, sorry, but mate, it's it's a bit wet and wild, and when it's not wet and wild, it's stinking hot. You could slice the atmosphere with a knife at the moment. It's that thick.
About 2 weeks ago, mate, it was. I think the air was so thick you could have taken a bite out of it.
Mate, you're glad to be back, though. I mean, let's be honest. We've had people touching base left, right, and centre, private message and stuff, and even just publicly through our socials and whatnot, saying they're missing us, begging us to come back. Personally, I don't know what all the hubbub is about. I mean, two blokes spinning a yarn about the Tigers, but no, we're thrilled to hear that sort of stuff, and we're glad to be back in no uncertain terms. I've been chomping at the bit, deciding for the last couple of weeks. Whether it was last week or this week or next week. And we know that we've got a lot to get through over the next couple of weeks at least because it's been one almighty off-season, mate. And here we are. We're back. Episode 1 for 2024. But, mate, we might as well sort of get rolling. Before we do, I will make note to those people watching on YouTube, don't mind my appearance tonight. I mean, normally stunningly handsome, as you all know, but these cheeks here, just a little bit of skin treatment there. So no, I'm not trying out my wife's makeup, believe it or not. I'm just trying to sort out a couple of little minor skin bits and pieces. But other than that,
tell the truth. You just come from Raggedy Ann dresser. Tell the truth.
What's that?
Tell the truth, you just came from a Raggedy Ann dresser.
Raggedy Ann. Oh, that's a
Yeah, she's
throwback.
got
Isn't it?
two big rosy cheeks.
Does she have a big, thick, hairy mustache?
Probably in the new age version, yeah.
Maybe it's a bit of a Bob Seger, Freddie Mercury / Raggedy Ann look. Hey, look, 4 minutes
worst
50,
two
and we haven't even started talking footy. We must be back for the Tiger Town podcast.
Yeah, banter is back. Banter is back.
It's more than banter, mate. It's tangents. Tangentville. We're the mayors.
It's what we do. It's what we do. And for some reason, people enjoy it. So I love it.
My friend, let's get into it. So, would it be too far to say that this is possibly the biggest off-season in West Tigers history?
Look, it's I can't remember one that's had this much calamity, this much excitement, this much thank God that's over kind of expression. So yeah, it's hard to deny that statement.
Good, bad, or ugly? Or all of the above?
I think everything that's happened has been positive. Everything. I think, we go from what's happened before Christmas. In the last pod, obviously, we talked about a lot of that. The sacking of the board, the bringing on of Richo and O'Farrell. The potential signing back then it had been announced of Luai, and then you look at this year, and I don't think anything that's happened since the break has been anything but positive. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but we all know there's going to be one thing that happened over the break that I'm very, very happy about, because I've been very vocal about this certain individual for a while. So,
yeah, mate. There's a fair bit of stuff that we need to get through, and it might be a long show, folks. So settle in, grab yourselves a cushion, maybe a Mai Tai or a chai latte or whatever your beverage is of choice. What do you like to drink, Toby? You're a virgin margarita man, aren't you?
Mate, I'm a hot chockey. You give me a hot chockey, I'm a happy man.
Couple of marshmallows.
Oh, if they're on offer?
Oh, they're always on offer, mate.
I don't know. Every time I think of marshmallows and chocolate, I always think of that Simpsons episode where Bart just makes a big, massive marshmallow hot chocolate, and I just want that.
Nothing elder millennials, Gen X millennial edges that we sort of are. Nothing says that like a Simpsons reference in the 2020s, eh?
100%. Nothing shows your age.
Yeah, exactly right. Mate, let's have a little bit of a rattle off before we dive into the run sheet there tonight. So I just wanted to mention that the last two off seasons, right? So between 22 and 23, we headed into last season thinking how spectacular the turnover was, and it was more from a squad from a squad perspective, I guess you'd say. Obviously, they had a new coaching structure there heading into 2023 with Sheens and Benji and Robbie backing him up. But the big talking points were the roster changes, correct? So Appy, Papali'i, Clemmer and Bateman all coming in. And us obviously getting rid of a lot of what we could quote-unquote dead wood. We got rid of a few nasty old contracts and whatnot. Jacob Little is probably not the best example of a nasty contract, but he's the first name that comes to mind. Sorry, mate?
Zane Musgrove.
So Musgrove most certainly is.
Yep.
He's a pure example. And there was a few others as well. It's a bit in the rearview mirror, but, up until that point, you'd probably argue that in terms of squad turnover, off-season last year was up until that point probably our best, yeah?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Like, it's
now,
yeah.
Yeah, so, obviously we didn't see those results yield on the field for a myriad of reasons that have been unpacked countless times by numerous talking heads, not least of all ours, and it culminated in our second wooden spoon at the end of last season. We're not going to dig that back up again. That is what it is. But the off-season was quite good, only then to be topped by this year. So if we rattle off a few of the basic ones, you've already gone through, obviously. Board completely overhauled. Gone.
Yeah.
Okay. So how long has that been coming? Obviously those board members haven't been on there for a decade or so. But if you look at the culmination of the last decade of West Tigers' success on the field, there has been dysfunction at board level, and probably even preceding that, you would say. Pascoe coming in 2014? 2014, I think, and then obviously Lee Hadjipantelis coming in as chair 2017, I think. and obviously the board members being there or thereabouts during that sort of period to broom through the place. So, you know, have you been able to find anybody, you know, anybody south of Newcastle that was disappointed with that result? I don't think you would, short of maybe Lee Hadjipentelis himself, correct?
You just took the name out of my mouth. Lee's definitely, he threw his toys out of the cot, but that's okay.
He did, yeah. And again, we're not digging this stuff back up. We're just going to go through what happened this off-season. The point I'm trying to make is we've definitely topped it in terms of positive outcomes. So off the back of that, as you mentioned, you know, obviously we've got a brand new chair coming in Barry O'Farrell, who we haven't seen a lot of or heard a lot of from yet, which is surprisingly bloody good and a bit of a welcome change. What we do have, though, obviously Shane Richardson coming in. We are hearing a little bit more out of him, which is fine. I'd much rather have Richo on a SEN weekly spot than have the likes of Lee, who says a lot, but doesn't really do much. So that was the change that happened there. We were obviously speculating Luai. West Tigers signed Luai. 6 years. $6 million over 5 years. Not too far to say, probably the biggest signing in West Tigers history. Most definitely, I would say.
Probably would put that, like, it's definitely the biggest, but it's probably going to be as much of an impact, and this is my personal view, as when we signed Takira in 2010.
I'm going to go a step further and say it's going to be more.
Yeah, that's what it's definitely going to be more, but since then, we haven't had a signing like this. And
I think it's going to be, and this has been done to death, and we know that this is old news, folks. We're just doing a quick little recap. So as far as I'm concerned, you know, not only our largest our biggest marquee signing in our history, in our short 25-year history, but also it's going to be the most impactful. And those two things don't always align. Obviously, you know, you talk about it's almost written into rugby league folklore now that the Rui Asatasi signing at Souths helped to sort of get their ball rolling in terms of marquee players seeing a future at that club. Before that, they had been perennial losers since they came back into the competition. Richo has a different view. He reckons that Inglis was the key signing, but I'm talking more about impactful signings. So, yeah, Luai, he'll be here next year. We're not going to talk a shitload about him over the course of this year. Similar to sentiment to what Benji said, because, you know, in a lot of ways, we're going to talk about him a lot for the next half decade. So let's just focus on where we're at this year. We also then had Olam obviously get signed eventually. Now, we'll break that down a little bit. We'll talk about pros and cons with that one. We had a couple of, would you call them possibly high upside, low downside signings, sort of money ball signings in your Alamalo and Fa'atape potentials?
Yeah, I think that adds amazing depth to what something we've always, well, for at least the last 5 or 6 years, we've really lacked depth in those areas. So, yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's a Moneyball signing. And anyone that doesn't understand that reference, go watch the movie Moneyball. Amazing movie. I love it.
Quite good. I'll even go back further. Charlie Staines re-signing, was that in the off-season or was that?
I potentially think we talked about it.
It was in the post-season, I think we'd mentioned it before, but it was in the post-season, so it's been between seasons. So you can add that to the list. We've spoken about his value. You know, that's another one. And I no doubt I'm going to miss something, but then obviously the most recent one has been the termination of Nofaluma's contract, which we were owing the better part of $1 million plus to him over the next couple of years. And with a settlement payment of $300, he's now off the books. We'll open up a roster spot, and obviously we'll cop $300 on the salary cap this year, which is still less than we paid him. And then next year we get that entire salary back as well. So we'll go through and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I know that everybody's probably a bit keen to hear what your view on that is, but when we get to that point, I will temper it with a few counterpoints as well, because he probably deserves it. Mate, Luai we touched on. We're not going to drag it up too much anymore, but quite simply, you're happy with the signing?
Oh yeah. Mentioned it last year when we were talking about it, and like I said, we get him. I'm stoked. We don't get him. I think we've got depth to at least be competitive. But yeah, like you mentioned countless times, all this does is it brings our 5-year plan ahead 4 years. So yeah, very, very happy. And like, it's very clear that Benji had a lot to do with that. And I think I mentioned this to you. I said it on here, and like, I think you just, mirrored it and reiterated it. But just having Benji there at the helm is going to be such an attraction for the younger kids. And I think now that Luai's coming across, it's very clear that that's what's going to happen. So,
I actually think that there was a real concern that the younger generation who tend to follow, people have always followed winning teams, but there's less and less tribalism and sort of hereditary passing down of teams to kids, it seems, these days, and that a lot of children these days just want to follow winners. And so there was a very real concern with the Tigers suffering a really, almost generations long drought of any form of success, not ever finishing in the top half of the competition, that we were going to, lose young fans at a worrying rate. And I think the signing of Luai, who is, a charismatic figure that relates to children, he's into sort of rap music and stuff that a lot of teens like, and younger kids. He's into his anime and that sort of stuff, which is popular amongst
teams as well. So
audience, all that sort of stuff. Like so he's pretty well in touch with that next generation. I think straight away we've got not only a quality player, we've got a super marketable superstar. And Richo said it himself. Basically, at the same time the signing was announced, he said that he'll be the face of the club. And so the other thing about Luai is, funnily enough, the more I find out about Jerome Luai, the more I'm stoked with his signing and the more I like the bloke. I genuinely mean that.
Yeah, and it's really, I actually agree with you on that, because, we've talked about, I don't know if I'm pretty certain we would have talked about it on this pod, but we definitely talk about it in our chats and, when we have a talk about footy and, how arrogant he is, how much, we can't stand him when he gets in people's faces and everything like that. But ever since there was the opportunity of us signing him, I've obviously started following him on Instagram, really followed his background. He's such a family man, really looks after his kids. He's really ingrained in the community, especially out in Penrith. So there's a good chance, he'll bring that out to, the Tigers community and things like that. And like what you said, it's starting to make me quite fond of him. And he can be a grub all he wants. It's just competitive nature, same as Joshy Reynolds. He was just competitive, just a grubber.
Yeah, Robbie Farah, same sort of thing. And putting the colours on make a big difference too. But even something like the press conference, that he called to announce it, first impressions, and this is the thing, and I'm not going to explain everything away simply because he signed with the club and now I've flipped 180. But the first impressions on actions, people need to take breaths on things and go, there are a multitude of perspectives towards that. So obviously a lot of people looked at that straight away, and it's like arrogant, egotistical, LeBron James style, superstar status, I'm holier than thou, yada yada yada. And then he sat there.
I did say, is this going to happen? And you said no. I told you.
Yeah. And you people can take the view that that's what it is until you sit down and you watch that press conference. And I watched it several times. He sat there and he answered every question. Every question that the journos wanted to ask him, he answered them truthfully. And one of the first things he said that is, he called it because he didn't want it to come from anyone else's mouth. He wanted to own the decision, which shows me that whether he's there or not, is a young man who's trying to take ownership over the moves he makes in his life and back himself. And it's just another example of, the more I think about the stuff that he does, not necessarily on the field, but what I find out about him, and the more I look at it, not through an immediate a gut reaction interpretation of the way he goes about his business, but actually look through it a little bit. I like a lot of what he brings, and that's an understatement. I'm really, really excited for next year. I'm really excited to get him in the club, because I just think that he is going to turn around the mentality off the field just as much, if not more, than what he will actually bring on the field.
Oh, 100%. And also, if we go back to that conference because obviously this isn't something we've talked about, because he signed. I think we did talk about. I think we came back just after he signed, didn't we, or something like that? We did.
No. So our last pod was mid-December, mate. We've been on.
Okay, so it wasn't official. Well, yeah. So the press conference hasn't happened, but he actually came out and he said another reason that he's done this, and like you said, he wanted to own it. was he wanted to get everything out of the way so that there is no more questions. I'm pretty certain he said, I won't be answering any more questions after this about this. I'm going to focus on the Panthers. I'm going to focus on them winning. How often do players, do these sort of things and just hide away and, it derails their season because everyone's speculating, everyone's talking, everyone's doing this. And, journos like to make up shit left, right, and center. And he was like, I just want to get this done, get this over with, ask any question you have right now, and I will answer it. But if you ask me something after that, I'm walking away.
And it has.
And I thought that was somebody that has high values, high morals, and he's somebody that, like you said, can bring this off-field attitude to the team. That something we've been missing for a long time. And I honestly, I probably feel it's been since Robbie retired was the last time that I can really remember somebody having those sort of values and morals to the team. It's always just been flippant.
Integrity.
Integrity. That's the word. Yep, integrity.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, mate, I agree. I agree 1,000%. And I actually think that we might see a few more of those types of things. I actually think that's going to be a bit of a model for how certain high-profile players, I would say, go about their business. I don't think they're all going to do it, but I think a lot of them are going to see the PR, the positive PR, and how effective that was. And you've noticed there's been very few stories about the Tigers and Luai since.
It's just been silence about him, really.
Yeah, exactly. There's no more speculation. Even Benji, when he's asked, he's flat out going, right, we've spoken about Jerome. We're really excited for him to get here in November. But until that point, we're not talking about him anymore because he's not here in 2024. And that's it. And that's beautiful. And I'm so happy that they're able to do that. And the fact that whether it was his idea or not, the execution of it was really good. And I really liked it.
Yeah, like it's not to say that obviously journos will keep pushing and keep pressing. And if we don't win games or if we go on another losing streak or something like that, the question's going to be asked. Oh, are you really looking forward to Luai coming next year and things like that? That's going to happen.
Yeah.
But that's as far as you could probably see it going. So.
Yeah, for sure. No, mate, I'm very, very excited, and this year feels like it's, as much as it's not a trial, feels like a bit of a sort of warm-up, but with a guaranteed light at the end of the tunnel. I am excited about this year, more than I have been for a long time, but I know that excitement's going to pump up again next year when we get at least Jerome Luai in our squad and everything that's going to come with him and whatever else off the back of that. So really great news. I'm wrapped. In my eyes, it's the biggest, most impactful signing in our history, and hopefully it's going to bring with it, or he's going to bring with him some success. What did he say? 5 rings? That'd be nice. I'd settle for 4, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, look, it'd be a pass mark for me if we got 3. So, yeah.
Imagine if he came and at some point in his 5 years, we play Penrith in the grand final and we beat them. Like that'd be great.
Yeah, look, that's kind of wishing well sort of things, isn't it? Like, let's get a penny, let's flick it in. But look,
yeah, you're right. There's no chance Penrith will make it to the grand final when we're flying. Sorry, Panthers fans. Bad luck.
Yeah, you won your 3 in a row. Hawthorn did it for
no Jerome Luai, no Penrith, please. Nathan who?
Yeah.
Rubbish.
Yeah, but all right. Well, look, I think the other big one, obviously, in the off season was, we've officially. Well, the one thing I don't think we've talked about, we might have talked about, is the official re-signing of Charlie Staines, because that's sort of in the same time frame as when Luai was re-signed, and we both have been very, very vocal about how much we like the way he plays, how much depth he gives us, especially he gives us that extra option at fullback if Buller goes down, touch wood. But yeah, very, very happy when that got announced. Very happy. So
yeah, 21st
of
November he signed. So we did speak about it obviously last year, but definitely an off-season signing as you mentioned. So
yeah, but it also makes me wonder too if he sort of knew that Luai was coming as well, and that's why he re-signed.
Oh yeah. I don't know, man. You don't know. It's hard to say, but
That's why
glad
speculation.
to have him in the side, and most definitely he's the clear fullback backup, which you got to have at least one. We've got others that will be able to play there at a pinch. We know Toa's done a little bit. The likes of even Alamalo, I think in rugby has played a bit. So if he kicks on, that might be okay. But glad to have him re-signed for sure.
Yeah,
mate. Move on to the next one, Justin Olam. So we've signed Justin Olam from Melbourne. Obviously, didn't mention in the intro to the show, but obviously the downside to that trade, as it were, was that Sean Blaw's gone a year early down to Melbourne, and no ill feelings towards Sean. Great player, seems like a quality young fella, and he had obviously signed with the Storm for 2025 and beyond, and it sounds like because Bellamy wanted him, it was too good of an opportunity for him to pass up, which is, look, fair enough. It would be hard to pass up to be able to be coached by one of the greatest coaches of all time. So, he goes the other way, mate. And I won't dwell too much on what we're going to miss because he's now a Storm player. But Olam, 3 years. Let me ask you 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
In 3 years' time, are we going to regret his signing? And the second question is, what do you think he brings to our side?
So I'm of two minds about the first question. Reason for that is I had the same opinion of BJ Leilua when he came over. Former, centre of the year as well. Was played at a grand final the year prior or 2 years prior. He ended up being an absolute dud. But we know that Olam is not Leilua. Sorry, we know that Olam is not Leilua. We know that Leilua thought he was king shit for his whole career. He left the Knights to go to Canberra because he thought he was better than the Knights. And Olam, he's a typical PNG boy, very humble, very very strong upper body. We all know that. So I think in 3 years' time, no, it's not going to be a mistake having him for those 3 years. He is 30 years old, so he'll be 33.
Geez, 30, the old bugger. Hey?
Look, we all know careers tend to wind down at around the early 30s unless you're Cameron Smith or Paul Gallen. But I think what he can do, even if it's not on the field, is bring these young guys through to mentor them a little bit. And I think, I read an article, we actually shared the article on our Facebook page with a little bit of a brief summary of what he wanted to achieve here at the Tigers. And one of them was obviously he wanted to be a bit of that senior figure within the squad. He wanted to lead by example, and he wanted to recapture that form that won him that Dally M Centre of the Year.
Yep.
So, that he was the first one to put his hand up and say that 2023 was not his best year. He was up and down. He was obviously, there were times when he was overcompensating in his defensive reads. But, apart from who we have now, his defensive reads are night and day compared to some of the options we have in centre at the moment. So, I think that was answering both your questions, what he brings, and do we reject, is it a mistake? No, I don't think so. Brings all the stuff I just said. Done.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting you brought up the BJ Leilua comparison because a few people have mentioned it, and I think one of the big differences is what's going on inside their skull as well. I don't think BJ is a particularly bright fella. He obviously, had a lot of talent and dominated and was a weapon at times, but I don't know whether he really had it between the ears, whether it was just intelligence or whether it was the ability to apply himself to continue in his later years to be top of his game. Whereas if I look at someone like Justin Olam, it's very easy to judge Justin Olam by looking at him. The man holds a master's degree in applied physics.
Really?
Correct. Parents made him study before he pursued a rugby league career.
Wow, did not know that.
So a very clever individual. And so that, for starters, combined with what you actually mentioned, which is one of my favourite traits in a player, which is humility. You've got to look long and hard these days to find a professional athlete that oozes humility. And I haven't I don't sit here watching reruns of Justin Olam interviews, but when you do hear him talk, he's an extremely humble bloke. And, in some ways, it's sort of the antithesis of what Jerome Luai brings, but for different reasons, I guess. Justin Olam isn't brought to bring about competitive cultural change. I think he is the sort of person that's brought in to demonstrate professionalism, particularly to our young backs. And we know that we've got, a pretty slim pickings at the moment before we look to develop players up or bring players in to fill not our back five, but, our outside backs. It's no secret we're a bit skinny in there, and not only does he fill that role, but as you said, he can slide in and become that lead by example type role model in those positions. And I would much prefer somebody who is, is humble and considerate and all that sort of stuff in regards to how he interacts with, whether it's his fellow centres or whether it's just either young players coming through or whatnot as well. The other thing as well that I think might have been Benji that mentioned the other day, that the loudest centre in terms of communication that he's ever played against was Justin Olam.
Yeah,
Now, that might be convenient because he's just signed him, but it would be a strange thing to make up. And even if he's exaggerating, he obviously is a loud centre, which means he's a good communicator. And we've spoken ad nauseum about the value of communication at centre and how they are the linchpin of every defensive line. That's my line. That's the angle that I approach defensive structures constantly. And the thing you mentioned before about his reads, every centre gets reads wrong. The thing I like about Olam is he makes early decisions and he commits. So that gives his winger time to go with him, or because he's making those early decisions, if he's made the wrong decision, he's made it early. So he's giving his time an extra split second or two to be able to sweep around and make up for the mistake that he made. And I really, really like that in a centre. He's a quick decision maker and a committed decision maker. So, all good, right?
Yeah, I think the thing too is, like, we talk about the fact that, last year wasn't his best year, especially with his defensive reads. Again, it comes down to probably the humility and, him being so humble, but also the traits that we talked about Jerome Luai and the fact that he owns it. It's not like he's blaming someone else on the wing, or he's sitting there and he's coming off and saying, we should have done better than that. It's like, that was my fault. I stuffed up. Let me fix that and I'll get back to you. And another thing, what he also brings is he's been in the Storm system for 8 years. He had to have learned some damn good professionalism from Bellamy down there. He brings that to the club as well. So,
yep, 100%. He's not without risks. So, he was or is carrying a bit of a knee issue that he's looking to get his body right. In the interview that he did a week or two back, he did reiterate that he's looking to get his body right, which would indicate that he's not quite there if we had round one played tomorrow. So I'm sure that he's on the track back. We're not in the inner sanctum, obviously, so we don't know the degree to which that situation is the case in regards to the knee. He also, I think he was carrying a shoulder, was it, or a lower back, I think, during last year, and was required, either through necessity or otherwise, to play injured. And quite a few people have made mention of that in the last few months. And I think off the back of that, he had quite the falling out with quite a few of the staff at Melbourne. And I think that would have accelerated the divorce from them, as it were, as opposed to simply his form has dropped off a cliff and he's no longer good enough for Melbourne. I think there's a bit more to it than that. And if he's in a happy space and he can get his body right, then I think that does allay a lot of those age/injury fears. Because at 30 years, 33 at the end of his contract, everybody who looks after their body by 33 is capable of still holding their own, most certainly. And it's not without risks, but I think it's a calculated one. Got it out eventually.
So you're saying that, like, your theory behind it is if he was playing through it, he was forced to play through it, and then because of that, he thought that the staff at Melbourne weren't treating it seriously or treating it correctly, and that's where the falling out came from.
I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but that was the understanding that I read.
I'm actually thinking that you heard that in the staff meeting, so I think you bugged the Melbourne office.
they're on to me. Yeah, no, look, from what I've heard, and the only reason I mention it is because I've heard it from multiple sources, like journos. I've heard it from a bit of scuttlebutt around some of the forums. I've heard it from past players and stuff in some of their podcasts they do privately, not privately, but they do their own podcasts and whatnot. So many people have mentioned it, and so where there's smoke, there's fire, and there must be something there. We're never going to know the whole story, but the bottom line is it gives me a little bit of faith that it's not simply, as I said, Melbourne kicking him to the curb because he's no longer good enough for Melbourne. I think there's a bit more to it than that. So,
yeah. Well, like we said, he's humble. He's got a lot of humility. He's a good player, and he's a great player on a good day. Like you said, it's a calculated risk, but it's a risk nonetheless.
Yeah, mate. So I wanted to move on. We've got the big one, your mate who we partnered ways with, Noffa. We'll talk about him in a moment, but I just wanted to mention as well a couple of the sort of under-the-radar signings that we made over the off-season. Now, these weren't the only ones, but these are the ones that sort of spring to mind for me. Is Solomon Alamalo, who came out of the Super 15 competition. He played for the Chiefs and the Highlanders. He wasn't currently playing at that level. He was coming back up through the level beneath as he had a mental health and injury hiatus for a couple of years. But he was the Chiefs Rookie of the Year in, was it 2018, 2019? 2018, I think. He's got quite the highlights package on YouTube, if anybody cares. He's got several, actually. He is a big, rangy, strong, quick outside back.
6 or something, isn't he?
Big fella. I think he's 194 centimetres or something, 193. So that'd put him at about 6'5" or 6'6" or something like that. He's well over 100 kilo. And so, he's a beast of an athlete. He's about 27 years of age or so. So quality. I mean, you don't come up in the New Zealand system and play for the Chiefs and the Highlanders if you are in any way below par, much less win their Rookie of the Year. So I've seen just from what I've read and what I've seen, he's played a bit of in the centres. He played a bit of wing and he played a bit of fullback as well. So he seems a pretty versatile bloke and never played rugby league, as far as I know, at any sort of real level. So rugby and rugby league, they're very transferable skills, obviously. So he'll be an interesting signing. What's that?
Especially as an outside back, very transferable.
Yeah, correct, mate. Exactly. Yeah. So he'll be an interesting signing. Obviously, he's a project of sorts. But occasionally these players do hit the ground running. They don't always, of course, but occasionally they do. Will Warbrick in the Storm is a perfect example. Plucked out of the All Blacks Rugby Sevens squad straight into NRL and more than held his own. He was up for Rookie of the Year award nomination. So, yeah, he's an interesting one, mate. Solomon Alamalo. I've probably wrapped it all up there, but have you seen much of him or heard much of him?
Yeah, probably the same as you, all from YouTube. Obviously, when I caught wind that we'd signed him or that we were looking to sign him from the forums, all those little hidey holes that we all know, I had a look at his highlights and he's very, very strong. He's got a very strong upper body, has a mean fend on him. And the thing that he's 6'6", he's got a very long wingspan as well. So he can sort of get that palm out quite... reminds me a lot of how GI used to be able to basically hold people's heads out in front of them while he ran past them, essentially. Quick is what he was when he debuted. I feel like he's chucked on a bit more muscle since then, so I don't know if he's as quick. But yeah, another big thing about him is he realised, and you and I both big advocates of mental health, he realised he had a bit of an issue with his mental health, so he decided to take a step back and, good on him. It takes a big man to do that. So I'm excited to see what he can bring. Very excited to see what he can bring.
100%. And Benji, we know, follows Union in New Zealand pretty strongly. Obviously, he grew up with that game as well. Went and played it for a while for Auckland, obviously. And, I would dare say that he sees that as a place that he can scour. And I'd say that he would know inside and out what the different playing levels have got in terms of playing talent. And he's plucked him out of nowhere. Nobody picked up on it. There was no whispers, no anything. It's just, here's this bloke we've signed for 12 months. get around him.
2
So 12
I
months.
think it was 2 years.
Signed him for a 1 year deal. So he's only signed for 2024 at this stage. But he is top 30. And it's an interesting one. So it's one of those wait and see. And I'm sure we'll see a bit of him in the trials and whatnot. For those who haven't seen anything of him, watch him on YouTube. Search up his name, Solomon Alaimalo. If you're looking for the spelling, just go to the Tigers website. They've got his profile on there as well. It's worth a watch. It's really interesting, exciting. Obviously, highlight packages are that for a reason, right? You know, they're the best bits of a player. You can make Alex Seafarth look like an absolute world beater if you snip together, you know, his best moments from the last 5 years. So not that he's a terrible player, but he's no highlight superstar. But if you catch my drift, but yeah, mate, no, it's going to be an interesting one, Solomon. So speaking of Solomon, we've got another Solomon or a Solomona or a Solo, I think is how he's referred for Atape.
They've got 3 different spellings of a very similar name in our squad.
We've got Solomon Sakuru as well, yeah.
Yeah.
We've got Solomona Fa'atape. So he comes from East Tigers in Brisbane, up here, actually. He was the centre of the year, I think, last year in
won the
Q Cup.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the Q Cup, yeah. Actually, that's what I wanted to mention before about Alaimalo. For those who haven't seen him, he reminds me a little bit, and I'm not saying he's the same quality of player. I'm just saying he reminds me a little bit of Joey Manu, Alaimalo, when he runs and how he moves. That was just something I wanted to mention as well, because I'm going to make another comparison with Fa'atape, one you mentioned, but I thought the same thing. Mate, we haven't got as much on him, but the stuff that we've seen, he's more of a shorter, stockier, well-built, strong centre, as opposed to Alaimalo, who is that taller, more rangy type of athlete. Mate, you made a comparison in our private chat about Fa'atape, the other signing we've made. Who did you compare him to? Because
he looks like a twin of Katoni Staggs.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's very much the way he plays, runs, how hard he runs, the way he breaks tackles. Very, very similar. Like when you think of Katoni Staggs and you think of him in attack, automatically the way that I think of him is how he basically fends them, but when he does it, he shrugs them off like that. That's what Fa'atape kind of does.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly right. Stocky, built low to the ground. Very, very strong and very low center of gravity. So, yeah, quite impressive. Just in terms of some of his stats in the Q Cup last year, so 21 appearances for 16 tries, not too shabby for a centre. 10 try assists. So he had 94 tackle breaks, which is 4 or 5 tackle breaks a game, 14 line breaks. So he's quite the attacking weapon, albeit Q Cup level, which is pretty good quality. Obviously, just that tier below NRL, along with New South Wales Cup. One area that I've heard from a couple of sources that he does need to improve is his tackling, his defence. He's a centre. He's a semi-professional centre at that level. So obviously that comes with the territory. Very rarely do you see centres, I think, at that Q Cup or New South Wales Cup level that are expert defenders, unless they are very safe and then they're not great in attacking. Otherwise, they generally find themselves up in NRL if they've got an attacking game to match. So, yeah, look, his tackle efficiency was 73.9, and obviously as a centre, that doesn't tell the whole story because reads, poor or otherwise, don't show up in that stat. But a bit of work to do there, obviously. But, yeah, mate, just another exciting prospect and another player with a lot of upside. Now, Solo Fa'atape is on a development deal, so that's different to Alaimalo. So he'll be on a development deal this year, and he goes into the top 30 next year, is my understanding. So maybe that was the 2 year that you were thinking about before. Yeah.
But yeah, just good depth again.
Yep.
And it's in an area that we just have not had depth. We've had wingers jumping into the centres. We've had back rowers jumping into the centres. You know, you had Luke Garner playing there 2 years ago. So never really
had further, mate. And we had Cole Lovett in there.
Oh, your mate, your best mate,
my mate, Nathan Malone. We could Keith Leilua,
wow.
Keith Lulia.
Wow.
Keith Lulia. We could go through, mate. There's a lot of quality centres at our club in the last decade or so.
Just bring back Dean Collis.
So effectively, and and we're going to look at the actual depth of the squad over the next coming the couple of weeks. We're going to go through position by position and see exactly where we are short, not only in, I guess, pure numbers, but in quality too. And so tonight's not the night for us to go through that, obviously. But, yeah, to your point, mate, 100%, particularly in centres. You know, as I said before, you don't have to be Einstein to figure out that we're very short in the outside backs. And, you know, through adding Olam, Alemalo and Fa'atape, at the very least, we're adding depth. And with Olam, we're getting a genuine walk-up starter, which is nice.
Yeah, very happy with. It's obviously something that an area you and I have flagged for the last 2 years on this show, but probably well before that as well. And they just never really did anything about it. And that was really frustrating to watch, like to see that they were trying to stock up in other areas, but this was an area that was just a gaping hole. And now that, you know, I guess we're both very, very comfortable with the forward pack. We know that next year the halves are going to be quality. I think they finally decided to pull the pin and identify the root of the, well, not the root of the cause, but one of the big issues in our sport. So,
yeah, and they're not waiting around 2 or 3 years until a marquee comes on. They're trying to find whatever ways they can do it as they go. And so you could look at that as threefold. They've brought in a walk-up starter in Olam, so they've signed external. They've signed a couple of backup signings or a couple of depth signings who, like I said before, they're low risk, high reward. So that's a separate approach. And then and I mentioned this to you pre-show, the likes of Luke Lalali'i, who's Kit's younger brother, who has been a fullback winger, an Australian schoolboy coming through. So he's 17, turning 18 this year. So he's just a year or two behind Kit. Development this year goes in next year. They've started him in the SG Ball Cup trial. I think it's a trial. It might even be round one this weekend at centre. And he's, as far as I'm aware, he's never played centre in any real way, shape or form. So they can see, even from a development point as well, they're trying to explore centre options or outside back options and play around with a few combinations as well, so that they can present it from a more comprehensive standpoint, which is the best way to be. You know, if you only fill your gaps by signing marquees, and you are lucky enough to sign 2 marquee starting centres, you're every chance of losing one, if not both of them, at some point in the season. And then what do you do? And then what's your succession plan? So the way they're going about filling these holes comprehensively is really, really pleasing, to your point.
Yeah, 100%.
Mate, I'm going to let you take the lead on David Nofaluma's story because I'm going to be the voice of reason and just make sure that you don't pop the party poppers too soon.
I don't go
mate, what was the situation with Nofa and how did it sort of end up? If anyone's been living under a rock, this is our summary.
Yeah, so basically, obviously we know that, well, first and foremost, we all know my opinion of Nofa. He's one of those players that I felt was just happy to accept a paycheck and felt that because he'd been with the Tigers for so long, he was owed a starting spot. Those thoughts were, I guess, solidified when he came back from break before Christmas and was beaten in the time trials by back rowers. I think he was even beaten by a front rower. So he obviously came back out of shape.
I think he finished second last in one of the time trials in the whole squad. That includes development players and players who were training with firsts.
Yeah,
might be wrong, but it's something like that.
Solidifies my opinion of the whole situation, and which is disappointing because 5-6 years ago I loved David Nofaluma. He ran harder than a lot of forwards in our team. He would break tackles all the time. His defensive reads were a bit iffy at times, but nowhere near as they've been the last 2 years. Again, it just felt like he was just accepting a paycheck, and because he was, now he's our top try scorer of all time, he felt he deserved the starting spot without doing much for it. So when he didn't finish the time trials and came back out of shape, they basically said, look, this is going to be your training regimen. You're going to train harder because you need to. And he threw his toys out of the cot, decided not to come into training, decided to kick up a stink. Again, solidifying my opinion. And eventually that incident was resolved. Obviously, he's had incidents in the past. He showed up a couple of years ago, hungover, to a training session. Obviously, that's something is a big no-no when you're a professional athlete. But that aside, we're talking about what happened now. And then obviously we went away for Christmas break. After that was resolved, like I said, he came back to training. After that was resolved, he basically went MIA. He, in the new year, he went home. I think he didn't come to a Monday training session because he had a bad gastro.
So he called in sick because he had gastro.
He had a bad gastro. And don't get me wrong, gastro sucks. I hate gastro. I have two kids.
I will also add that gastro is a very convenient excuse that people will often give so that they are not asked any questions about wanting a day off work, because nobody wants details when you say you've got gastro. They just, oh, yep, no worries, let us know.
Stay away from me. But yeah, no, like I said, I've got two kids in daycare. Gastro is a very real thing at times. But the thing is, there is protocol when you're a professional athlete. It's basically you need a doctor's certificate, but because they have an in-house doctor, you need to answer the doctor's calls and you need to make sure that you answer those questions that they give you. He didn't answer anyone's calls, didn't answer anything for multiple days. I think they tried for 48 hours to get in contact with him. So much so, another player had to go do a welfare check on him. It turns out nothing was wrong with him. He just didn't want to go. Didn't want to go to training, didn't want to do anything. So basically,
have you had that last bit confirmed, or is that you embellishing a little bit? I hadn't actually heard that.
Don't ruin stories with the truth. What are you doing?
All right, we're just going to cut your mic for a little bit because you're getting a bit too excited about his leave.
I've popped the bowl that way. Oh shit.
Yeah. No, that's basically the story, isn't it? And from that point, what they served him a termination letter, and
well, Richo, you can tell this is essentially this was. Obviously, it was ticked off by Benji, but I think this was spearheaded, and this was something I have read. This was spearheaded by Richo because both of them want to set standards now. They want to make sure that we are a professional football club. Richo's done it for two clubs now, turned them into not so much basket cases, but they've turned them from something that sort of resembles a professional rugby league club to the gold standard of a professional rugby league club. And that's what he wants to do with the Tigers, and he can't have that shit. So, essentially, a termination letter was served. I believe he originally was going to go in, so I think the termination letter was served on the Monday. He was going to go in on the Wednesday with his lawyer to dispute the termination claim, but then they came to a resolution within hours of the termination letter. Like, the termination letter had gone or had been made public. Within hours, they came to an agreement to part ways for a third of his contract. So
effectively, in the realms of about 300 or so payout. So
and he had a 2-year contract of $500,000 a year, so under a third of his contract, which shows to me that he was looking for an out for a while. So my original opinion of him still sort of stands in terms of he just didn't want to work for it. But I think the fact that he expected to be a startup, I feel like I might have just sort of put that into the atmosphere and let it run its course. From all of that, him taking that pay cut so quickly, wanting to leave the club. So he's wanted it out for a while. And potentially it started happening after he came back from Melbourne. But he wasn't great before that anyway, so it's hard to say.
Yep. And that's it, mate. So, I don't think there's a lot of people by the end of his tenure that were overly disappointed. But when I said before I'm going to be the voice of reason, it has to be mentioned that Nofaluma spent a lot of years at the club and did it tough through our losing records for almost, if not his entire tenure at our club. His name is currently on the leaderboard for the all-time greatest try scorer for the West Tigers, and he spent the better part of a decade, blood, sweat and tears for the jersey. So, as much as there was times when, his application was questioned and his ego was questioned and he had a few incidents of being dropped and attitude and this, that and the other. He's a unique character. We've always known that, but it has to be said that he not dissimilar to Brooksy in that he gave a lot of service for the club and, at times was very maligned, but that has to be recognised because, he played near on 200 games for this club and did contribute heavily over his time here.
No, and like I said, there's no, I loved Noffa 5-6 years ago. Loved him. We're talking about up to 2019. I think he debuted in 2013. And up till 2019, loved Noffa. Loved him. I think he ran hard. He had put everything on the line for this club. But then, something happened. None of us are in the inner circle, but his execution wasn't there. His application wasn't there. His attitude was poor. There's rumours that, he blamed his teammates for not getting selected in the 2020 Origin. Things like that. So, there's... Who knows what happened? Hopefully, from a mental health perspective, he's all good. But at the end of the day, I'm a West Tigers fan. I want to see the West Tigers win. If he doesn't want to get on that bus, let's use an Ivan Cleary and get off. So he did.
And we did. Mate, just off the back of that, in terms of wing, who are your starting wingers for round one now?
Charlie Staines is a walk-up
Sorry,
start.
round two.
Sorry, round two, yes. We're not round one. That's okay. Charlie Staines walk-up start, by far.
Yeah.
I was reading, just a little bit of a tangent, I was reading the predicted lineups for Fox Sports and they didn't even have Charlie Staines in there. I'm like, sometimes these journalists, I don't even think they watch the games.
Oh, I think people also forget who's actually in some squads. Sometimes they don't bother checking.
But, on the other wing, I think probably Junior Tupou, even though he's off to the Dolphins, still has done a bit of service for us. He's a good player. And, I think he's my other winger.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
I think you're probably right. I think it does depend a little bit on centre because whoever fills that other centre spot, we're going to have either, in my opinion, probably Toa, but Naden, if he's fit and firing and he's got his head right, he'll be pushing as well because on his day, Naden's a weapon as well. And we know that he's versatile enough to play both. So if there's that view that Junior Tupou is still a bit shaky under the high ball and that they want to look ahead for a progression plan with those that are here, maybe Tupou does get overlooked, and maybe one of Stafford or Naden fill that spot on the wing. But I think it's probably the safe money with what you said. But again, if we go through the squad really quickly, you've got the likes of Alex Lobb, who's over on a development deal, who apparently have been training quite well. Asu Kapoa can do it at a pinch, although that's probably the last choice. You've got Naden that can play wing. Charlie Staines, obviously, I think you and I both think he's the first winger picked. You got Tupou there, and then you've got Alamalo. He's an unknown quantity at the moment. And then you've got Stafford as well, who can also play wing and has played wing too. So
I think you've also got that young kid that came over from the Bulldogs, Dan Casey.
Declan Casey, that was the one I've been thinking about mentioning. I keep forgetting. I actually think Declan Casey's going to play a bit of footy this year.
Yeah.
He's a bit of a goer. Physically, he doesn't seem to be. He's not overly tall. He's not overly built. He's not overly strong. He doesn't seem.
He reminded me
quick.
a lot of Scott Drinkwater in his stature.
Okay. Yeah. Right. I think he's probably a little bit bigger. But the point I'm trying to make is just he's a goer. I think he's all heart, and I think he's a bit of a vicious little thing when he gets on the paddock, and he's there front and centre in a lot of the training photos, whether he's training with whatever squads they're running in their jousting sessions. So, good point. I think that we might see a bit of him too.
But he's New South Wales Cup too, isn't he? He's not development deal.
I think he's on a training trial.
Yeah.
And so obviously this year the training trials they still have
round
to wait
10.
round 10, but the developments can play from round 1.
Yeah.
So effectively, I think we've got 5 development players this year, and so we've effectively got a squad of 35 from the first round or from round 2, our first game, obviously. So, we'll see a bit more in the trials, I think. But look, again, I'll bring up Brooks again. Like it was time for Brooks and the Tigers to divorce for both parties, and it's exactly the same with Noffa. You might even argue it's a year or two too late, but. We have a fresh start now. He's done his time. He's done his service. His name's on that honour board for the try scorers, and and all that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, he'll forever, have a spot in our history as probably one of our all-time greatest try scorers when it's all said and done. Yeah. Yes, mate. So, look, the other thing I did want to mention as well was that this weekend, so if anybody's after some footy, I've got good news for you. Juniors kick off this weekend. So, trials all across the board. You've got Andrew Johns Cup, you've got Laurie Daly Cup, you've got SG Ball trials, you've got Harold Matts trials as well. In terms of being televised, I know that New South Wales Rugby League and their Facebook page often live streams games. I know that they are live streaming the Laurie Daly Cup and the Andrew Johns Cup on Sunday morning. I do not have confirmation about Harold Matts and SG Ball, although you might be interested if they are showing the SG Ball trials, at the very least interested to watch the SG Ball season when it kicks off in a few weeks' time, because named on the weekend are the likes of Talon De Silva. He's going to play a bit of SG Ball. We've got Jordan Miller, one of our good up-and-coming props, is named in there as well. We've got the bloke down from Taree, Navrin Willett, that we've heard a little bit about as well. He gets his first start in
big, tall bloke.
Near on 2 metres at the age of 18.
Big.
And big raps as well.
Looks a lot like Inglis, like literally looks a lot like Inglis when he debuted.
You love those Inglis comparisons, don't you?
Well, there's a reason for that, isn't there?
Yeah, because he does look like him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's quite a few other names in there as well that are well worth watching. Like I said, Luke Lalii is one that is picked at centre, I think, for this weekend as well. So I think that the SG Ball squads this year, I don't know that we'll see those players play a lot of that season. I think they'll play early games almost as trial games to get a bit of or game time in the legs, leading then into Flegg and New South Wales Cup, which I think a lot of those players will end up playing a fair bit of over the course of the season. Most certainly Talon. I mean, Talon will probably play a decent amount of first-grade games to a degree. So, but it'll be pretty interesting. I think that the Magpies team in particular, which is always tends to be a little bit more stacked than what the Balmain side is, I think they're probably going to go pretty well this year if we don't deplete them too much by playing our guys up. But yeah, it all looks pretty promising.
Does. It's like, especially if, we're talking about the juniors, Harold Matts, SG Ball, but I'm really excited for what we brought in terms of New South Wales Cup. More that we didn't re-sign Will Smith, but that's neither here nor there. But we've got that young bloke, Nick, I think it's like Mudakis. He was played for Greece in the World Cup. Centre, big, bulky centre. He's come over. Obviously, Declan Casey has come over. We've got a pretty decent New South Wales Cup side, and that's not to mention all the juniors that would most likely start. So, likely Kit Lally will be starting New South Wales Cup. You maybe have Justin Matamua starting in New South Wales Cup. You think about that added with the sprinkle of these new guys in, we might be really competitive in New South Wales Cup as well. So,
yeah, anything can happen as well. And we've seen, last year we were pretty bullish about our chances in the juniors, in particular SG Ball, and we found that what happened was first we're struggling, we had a few injuries, and that depleted a bit of New South Wales Cup, and then we were trying to also play some of our best juniors above grade, and so we sort of depleted some of our junior grades to try to push development of select few. So it didn't really work out in the end. We didn't really get the results that we wanted, but I think that we're going to start to see a little bit more consistency through these lower grades and into Cup, like you mentioned. And obviously, if we've got competition for spots, that's only a good thing. All those names I mentioned before, many of them are going to find themselves in New South Wales Cup. You can only fit so many in that back line. And, if you've got, a former Super 15s Chiefs fullback playing in New South Wales Cup, and you've got, the likes of Fa'atape, the best centre in Q Cup last year, and all these sorts of players who can't crack first at the start of the year, more than likely we're going to see some positive outcomes from those types of things too. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, very good. Mate, I reckon we're sort of getting a bit towards the end of our agenda for this first show back, but we've got plenty of weeks coming up. So we've obviously got a couple of trials in a few weeks' time, Warriors being the first one, obviously. And then we also have an extra week off because we're sitting out round 1, so we guarantee ourselves to start in 9th position by the time round 2 rolls around. So we've got quite a few episodes to come before the season proper kicks off. So we were talking pre-show. I think we're going to jump into a fairly in-depth sort of squad breakdown and maybe dive into the junior results a little bit as well over the coming weeks. So we won't unpack all that too much at this stage. But mate, is there anything else you wanted to mention before we sort of pack up for our welcome back show?
Not really. I mean, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but there's been pictures of GI in West Tigers colours recently, or just recently today, which got everyone's tongues wagging. Why is he there? But yeah, it's pretty cool. He's there to help Buller in terms of mentorship, more so off the field because of his such quick rise, I guess, through the ranks. So that's pretty cool to see him in West Tigers colours. Would have been nice if it was during his prime, but yeah, it is what it is. So just that was pretty cool to see. But we'll share that bit of a summary about that on the Facebook page in case people haven't seen it. Obviously, we mentioned that we'll probably start sharing a bit more of that for people that don't have access to paid subscriptions. For news, we'll share a little bit of a summary of the article. Basically, too long didn't read sort of an aspect, and you can understand what's happening in Tigerland without having to actually pay for it.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for our summaries and whatnot. We're gonna start to sort of expand that a little bit, I think, this year on all of our platforms. You can start to look for us as well on Instagram and Twitter. Once that's up and running by the time the season proper rolls around, we'll be launching that, I dare say, just prior to round 1. So that's still a work in progress, but it will most definitely be up and running. And we really want to sort of increase that social media presence, mainly because it just makes the communication with everybody a bit easier as well. And it allows us to get a bit more info out to you guys over the course of the year, which, quite a few people have sort of asked if they can find us in a number of different areas where they weren't able to in the past, as we sort of fumble and bumble our way in this podcast space and sort of figure it out as we go. So we do appreciate the patience from everybody as well. So having Best on Ground Digital has helped us a little bit, the pair of us, mate, having a bit of a yarn to them as well. So if you happen to be in that space, listeners, and you're after an agency or somebody to sort of point you or your business in the right direction, as we said, they look after the little guys, so you can't go wrong there.
Definitely.
Cool, mate. Well, as we do and as we have always done, PSA time. Find us on YouTube. Find us on Facebook, Tiger Town Podcast. You can also obviously message us directly. We tend to get a few messages on the daily basis at the minute, and I would say that we pride ourselves on being very prompt responders, very prompt and enthusiastic responses. I think we're very good at that at this stage.
Yeah.
Long may it continue.
Yeah, we'll see. It's year 3. We'll see if that happens in year 10.
It is, yeah. And we're going to look at expanding out into Apple Podcasts as well, hopefully this year. So yeah, we're trying to put our fingers in a few little pies and basically just trying to make our humble little pod a little bit more accessible to everybody. Again, we've had a few people ask about Apple, and that's not my forte as much as I do love my MacBook. So we'll move into that space too. We always tend to say at the end of every single episode, we've got 2 podcasts that we love to plug because they do great work. Main one being obviously West Tigers podcast. The boys over there do fantastic work. And then obviously the second one being West Life. Those blokes do good stuff as well, and well worth a listen between the pair of them. The fact that we've got several options to listen to on a weekly basis for everything West Tigers is truly awesome. And Toby and I mean it when we say that we do listen to both those podcasts literally every single week. And the fact that there's a variety of perspectives talking about very similar ideas is nothing but positive. I love it.
It always gives you a different, especially when you listen to Gary and that on West Tigers. It always gives you a little bit more of a different way to look at things. That's instead of I obviously have one train of thought sometimes, and listen to those guys gives me another way to look at it. So.
Absolutely, mate. There's never a podcast from either of those that I sit there and don't at oftentimes sit there nodding along going, yeah, good point. I agree 100%. Look, there's occasional times where we're listening along. We say, what on earth are you talking about? But that's half the fun of it. I'm sure that happens with us more than it doesn't, right?
Oh, 100%. People, especially when we go on our tangents, our listeners probably think, can you two just shut the fuck up?
Mate, Dad said sometimes we listen back to our own work and we tell ourselves to shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
It's clearly not working.
No.
Mate, I'm rapt to be back. you know,
Me too. Year
they
3,
talk-
mate.
Year 3.
It's pretty crazy to think this will be the 3rd year we've been doing this, and it's just two blokes having a yarn. That's all it is.
That's it. And this humble little podcast is growing, and we love it. We're flattered by it. We say it all the time. Keep getting in touch. Hop on the socials. Give us a bit of feedback. Tell us what we do well. Tell us, probably a bit easier to tell us what we don't do well. And we'll keep trucking on and doing our best. Yeah, and it certainly beats, I will say, listening to any of the Tigers podcasts certainly beats sitting there listening to the plebs on 360 these days, doesn't it?
Yeah, we're not going to get into that. I'll go down a rabbit hole with that. So,
very good, mate. Well, I think at this stage there's probably not much else to do other than kick off the 2024 podcast season with a good old go the mighty West Tigers.
go the West Tigers.